The drilling rig's thunderous roar echoed across Jake Morrison's 1,000-acre ranch. The massive auger bit deeper into the Texas soil. After 3 years of drought and skyrocketing water bills, he'd finally decided to dig his own well. What he didn't expect was the white Mercedes SUV speeding down his dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust that could be seen from miles away. Karen Whitfield stepped out of her pristine vehicle, her designer heels immediately sinking into the soft earth. As president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, she carried herself with the authority of someone who'd never been told no. Her perfectly styled blonde hair remained untouched by the Texas wind, and her clipboard was already armed with violation notices. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice cutting through the mechanical noise. "You need to stop this operation immediately." Jake wiped the sweat from his brow and walked over, his weathered hands still holding the radio he'd been using to communicate with his drilling crew. At 42, he'd inherited this ranch from his grandfather and had spent the last 15 years building it into a sustainable cattle operation. His employees, Miguel and Tommy, watched nervously from beside the rig. "Ma'am, this is private property," Jake said calmly. "I'm not sure what business this is of yours." Karen's eyes flashed with indignation. "Oh, it's very much my business. This entire area falls under the Meadowbrook Hills Community Water District, and according to Section 4.7 of our covenants, any unauthorized well drilling is strictly prohibited without board approval." "Community Water District?" Jake laughed, genuinely confused. "Lady, my family's owned this land since 1952. We're not part of any HOA. Actually, you are." Karen produced a thick folder from her briefcase with the satisfaction of a prosecutor presenting evidence. When the county rezoned this area in 2019, all properties within a 5-mile radius were automatically enrolled in our district for water management purposes. "You should have received notification." Miguel, who'd been working for Jake for over a decade, stepped forward. "Boss, remember those letters we kept getting? The ones about water restrictions and community meetings? You threw them away because you said we weren't part of any community." Jake's stomach began to sink. He vaguely remembered dismissing several official-looking letters, assuming they were scams or mistakes. "Even if that's true, I have every right to dig a well on my own property, not without environmental impact studies, geological surveys, and board approval." Karen replied smugly. "The fine for unauthorized drilling is $250,000, plus immediate cessation of all operations." Tommy, the youngest member of Jake's crew, couldn't help but whistle low. $250,000, boss. That's more than we spent on the entire herd last year." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. The ranch was profitable, but barely. Most of his capital was tied up in cattle, equipment, and land improvements. A $250,000 fine would bankrupt him. "There has to be some mistake. I never agreed to any of this. Ignorance of the law isn't a defense," Karen said, clearly enjoying her moment of power. "You have 72 hours to cease operations and submit payment, or we'll place a lien on your property." As Karen walked back to her Mercedes, she paused and turned around. "Oh, and Mr. Morrison, your cattle will need to find a new water source. The community board voted last week to restrict agricultural water usage during the drought. Residential properties take priority. Jake watched her drive away, his mind racing. Without water, his cattle would die. Without his cattle, he'd lose everything his family had built. But as he looked at the drilling rig, and then at the sprawling subdivision visible in the distance, a slow smile began to spread across his face. What Karen didn't know was that Jake's grandfather had been a hydrologist, and those old survey maps in the ranch house showed something very interesting about the local water table, something that was about to change everything. 71 hours later, Jake sat in his grandfather's old study, surrounded by yellowed geological surveys and water table maps that hadn't seen daylight in decades. His grandfather, Samuel Morrison, had been more than just a rancher. He'd been a certified hydrologist who'd worked for the county in the 1960s, mapping underground water sources across the entire region. Miguel knocked on the door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Boss, the drilling crew wants to know if they should pack up." Karen called twice today, threatening to bring the sheriff. "Not yet," Jake said, pointing to a detailed map spread across the oak desk. "Look at this, Miguel." Grandpa mapped every aquifer in a 50-mile radius. "See this blue line running right under our property?" Miguel leaned in, squinting at the faded markings. "What am I looking at?" "The Guadalupe Aquifer. It's the primary water source for the entire county, and according to these surveys, it flows directly under our ranch before feeding the municipal system." Jake traced the blue line with his finger. "Every drop of water in Meadowbrook Hills originates right here." The implications began to dawn on Miguel's weathered face. "You mean?" "I mean Karen's subdivision, her precious HOA, even the county, municipal building all depend on water that flows under my land first." Jake pulled out another document, this one more recent. "I've been reading up on Texas water law all night. Surface water belongs to the state, but groundwater belongs to the landowner." Tommy burst through the door without knocking, his young face flushed with excitement. "Boss, you need to see this. That lady Karen is back, and she brought friends." Through the window, Jake watched as 3 vehicles approached. Karen's Mercedes, a county sheriff's patrol car, and a white pickup truck bearing the logo of the Meadowbrook Hills Water Authority. Karen emerged first, followed by Sheriff Davidson, whom Jake had known since high school, and a thin man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Morrison," Sheriff Davidson called out as Jake stepped onto the porch. "I'm sorry about this, but I've got a court order to shut down your drilling operation." Karen stood behind the sheriff with barely contained glee. "Mr. Morrison, I'd like you to meet Richard Sterling, our attorney. He's here to explain the legal ramifications of continuing your unauthorized activities." Sterling stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Morrison, my client has filed an injunction against your drilling operation. You're in violation of county ordinances, HOA covenants, and potentially state environmental regulations." Jake nodded calmly. "That's interesting, Mr. Sterling. I've been doing some reading myself." He held up a folder containing his grandfather's surveys. "Tell me, are you familiar with the Texas Water Code? Specifically Chapter 36 regarding groundwater conservation districts?" Sterling's confident expression flickered slightly. "Of course. What's your point?" My point is that according to state law, I own all groundwater beneath my property. And according to these geological surveys conducted by the county in 1963, that includes the primary source of water for your entire district. Karen laughed dismissively. That's absurd. Our water comes from the municipal treatment plant, which draws from the Guadalupe Aquifer, Jake continued, an aquifer that originates beneath my ranch and flows northeast toward town. In fact, these surveys show that approximately 80% of the region's groundwater passes through my property first. Sheriff Davidson, who'd remained quiet until now, spoke up. Jake, what exactly are you getting at? Jake smiled. What I'm getting at, Sheriff, is that if Karen wants to play legal hardball, we can play legal hardball. You see, I've decided to exercise my full rights as a groundwater owner. Effective immediately, I'm installing a comprehensive pumping system to extract water for my agricultural operations. You can't do that, Karen sputtered. There are regulations about excessive groundwater pumping. Actually, I can, Jake replied. Texas follows the rule of capture for groundwater. I can pump as much water as I want from my own property for any beneficial use, and cattle ranching definitely qualifies as beneficial use. Sterling was frantically flipping through papers in his briefcase. Even if that's true, you still can't drill without proper permits. Oh, I'm not drilling anymore, Jake said. The well's already complete. We hit the aquifer at 300 feet, and it's producing 200 gallons per minute, more than enough for my cattle. Karen's face had gone white. What are you saying? Jake's smile widened. I'm saying that if you want to find me $250,000 and cut off my water supply, then maybe the community should understand just how dependent they are on the water flowing under my land. As the weight of his words sank in, Karen realized she might have picked a fight with the wrong rancher. But Jake wasn't finished yet. 2 weeks after Jake's confrontation with Karen, the situation had escalated beyond anyone's imagination. True to his word, Jake had installed a state-of-the-art pumping system capable of extracting 5,000 gallons per minute from the Guadalupe Aquifer. What had started as a dispute over well permits had transformed into a full-scale water war. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a hydrogeologist from the University of Texas, stood beside Jake's wellhead, taking readings from her equipment. She'd been monitoring the aquifer for the past week at Jake's request, documenting every aspect of the water extraction. The numbers don't lie, Dr. Chen explained to Jake and Miguel. Your pumping operation is drawing down the aquifer level by approximately 6 inches per day. At this rate, the municipal wells downstream will start experiencing reduced pressure within a month. Miguel shook his head in amazement. So we really can affect their water supply, not just affect it. Dr. Chen continued. If Jake continues pumping at maximum capacity, the municipal system could lose up to 60% of its water supply within 6 weeks. The subdivision wells would be the first to go dry. Jake had mixed feelings about the situation. Part of him felt guilty about potentially harming innocent neighbors, but another part of him was furious about Karen's threats and the $250,000 fine that still hung over his head. His phone rang. It was Sheriff Davidson. Jake, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station? An hour later, Jake sat across from Sheriff Davidson in the cramped office that smelled of coffee and old paperwork. Through the window, he could see Karen's Mercedes in the parking lot. "Jake, I've known you since you were in high school," Sheriff Davidson began. "Your grandfather was a good man, and you've always been fair in your dealings. But this situation has gotten out of hand." "How so, Sheriff?" "Mrs. Whitfield is claiming you're engaged in economic terrorism. She says you're deliberately trying to harm the community water supply." Jake laughed bitterly. "Economic terrorism? She threatened to bankrupt me with a $250,000 fine for digging a well on my own property." "What would you call that?" Before Sheriff Davidson could answer, there was a knock on the door. Karen entered, followed by Richard Sterling and two men Jake didn't recognize. One wore an expensive suit and carried himself like a politician. The other was younger. With the eager look of a reporter, "Mr. Morrison," the politician said, extending his hand. "I'm County Commissioner Bill Hayes. We need to find a solution to this problem before it affects the entire community." The reporter stepped forward. "I'm Jason Webb from Channel 7 News." "Mr. Morrison, is it true that you're holding the community's water supply hostage?" Jake looked at each face in turn, realizing that Karen had escalated the situation far beyond a simple HOA dispute. "I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm legally extracting water from my own property for agricultural use." "Agricultural use?" Karen scoffed. "You're pumping 5,000 gallons per minute. That's not agriculture. That's warfare, Commissioner." Hayes cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, the county is prepared to offer you a compromise. We'll waive the HOA fine if you agree to limit your pumping to reasonable agricultural needs." "Define reasonable," Jake replied. Sterling consulted his notes. 50 gallons per minute maximum. That's more than sufficient for your cattle operation. Jake stood up slowly. "Gentlemen, lady, I appreciate the offer, but I think you're missing the bigger picture here. For 3 years, I've been paying exorbitant rates for municipal water during a drought. For 3 years, I've watched my cattle suffer while Karen's subdivision waters their lawns twice a week. Now you want me to accept arbitrary limits on water from my own land? What are you proposing?" Commissioner Hayes asked. Jake smiled. "I'm not proposing anything yet. But I think the community needs to understand the true value of water." Karen wanted to charge me $250,000 for digging a well. That works out to about $1,000 per gallon per minute of capacity. The room fell silent as everyone did the math based on that valuation. Jake continued. "My current pumping capacity is worth approximately $5 million. If the community wants me to reduce my pumping, perhaps we should discuss fair market compensation." Karen's face turned red. "You can't be serious. You're trying to extort the entire county." "I'm not trying to extort anyone," Jake replied calmly. "I'm simply applying the same economic principles that Karen used when she fined me. The only difference is scale." Jason Webb was scribbling notes furiously. "Mr. Morrison, what happens if the county refuses to negotiate?" Jake looked out the window at his ranch in the distance, where his drilling rig stood like a monument to his determination. "Then I guess we'll all learn together just how much water is really worth." As the meeting broke up with no resolution, Karen realized that her attempt to intimidate a simple rancher had backfired spectacularly. But Jake wasn't finished playing his cards yet. 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the boardroom of the newly constructed Meadowbrook Regional Water Authority building, looking out at faces that had once dismissed him as a simple rancher. The drought had worsened, his pumping operation had reduced municipal water pressure by 40%, and the entire county was desperate for a solution. Dr. Chen sat beside him, her final impact report spread across the mahogany table. County Commissioner Hayes occupied the head of the table, flanked by Karen Whitfield, Richard Sterling, and 3 other HOA board members Jake had never met. The air conditioning hummed quietly, a luxury that many homes in the subdivision could no longer afford as water shortages had driven utility costs through the roof. Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner Hayes began, we're here to finalize the agreement that will resolve this water dispute once and for all. Karen looked haggard. The past 3 months had not been kind to her. Angry residents had attended every HOA meeting, demanding answers about rising water costs and declining pressure. Several families had sold their homes and moved away, and property values in Meadowbrook Hills had dropped 15%. Mr. Morrison, Commissioner Hayes continued, please outline your final proposal. Jake stood up, his weathered hands steady as he opened his folder. 3 months ago, you fined me $250,000 for exercising my property rights. Today, I'm offering to solve everyone's water problems permanently. He pulled out an architectural drawing. I propose to construct a state-of-the-art water treatment and distribution facility on my ranch. This facility will process 5 million gallons per day from the Guadalupe Aquifer and sell treated water to the county at market rates. Sterling interrupted. Market rates. What exactly does that mean? It means, Jake replied, that instead of the county paying premium prices to distant suppliers during drought years, you'll have a local, reliable source. My facility will provide water at 20% below current municipal rates. Karen found her voice. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Jake smiled. I get to turn my ranch into the most profitable water company in the county. Conservative estimates suggest annual revenues of $2.5 million. The room erupted in murmurs. Commissioner Hayes called for order. Dr. Chen stood up to present her analysis from an environmental standpoint. Mr. Morrison's proposal is actually superior to the current system. His planned extraction rate will maintain aquifer sustainability while providing reliable supply during drought years. But what about our fine? Karen demanded. You can't just ignore a $250,000 violation. Jake reached into his briefcase and pulled out a cashier's check. Actually, Karen, I can do better than that. He placed the check on the table. This is payment in full for your fine, plus interest. Karen stared at the check in disbelief. How did you? Turns out there's good money in water consulting. Jake explained. 3 other counties have hired me to conduct aquifer surveys. Amazing how valuable grandfather's old geological knowledge became once people realized what I could do with it. Tommy, now Jake's operations manager, entered the room carrying a tablet. Boss, sorry to interrupt, but we just got the permits approved for the expansion project. Jake nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, the Morrison Water Company officially begins operations next month. Our first commercial contract is with the city of San Antonio, providing emergency water supplies during peak demand periods. Commissioner Hayes looked incredulous. You're saying you'll be competing with the municipal system? Not competing, Jake corrected, supplementing, during normal years. I'll provide 20% of county water needs. During drought years, I can scale up to 60%. And unlike the current system, my supply is drought-proof. Karen slumped in her chair, finally understanding the full scope of what she'd unleashed. So you win. You get your water, you get rich, and we all have to buy water from you. Jake's expression softened. Karen, this was never about winning or losing. This was about respect. You tried to use legal intimidation to force me off my own land. But sometimes when you pick a fight with someone, you discover they're stronger than you thought. He turned to address the entire room. My water company will employ 15 people from this community. Property values will stabilize because water supply is guaranteed. And yes, I'll make a profit, but so will everyone else when their utility bills drop and their home values recover. Dr. Chen added, Mr. Morrison's operation will actually improve regional water security for decades to come. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and signed contracts, Jake reflected on how a simple well drilling project had transformed his life. Karen's attempt to fine him into submission had instead forced him to discover the true value of his land and his grandfather's legacy. Walking out to his truck, he found Miguel waiting with a grin. So, boss, what's next? Jake looked back at the building where Karen was still sitting, staring at the contracts that would make him a millionaire while solving everyone's water problems. Next, we drill another well. I just got a call from Austin. Seems they're interested in drought-proof water supplies too. As they drove back to the ranch, Jake couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he'd simply paid Karen's fine and given up. Sometimes the best response to intimidation isn't surrender, but showing your opponent just how much they underestimated you. What would you have done in Jake's situation? Would you have fought back? Or would you have found a different way to handle Karen's demands? And hey, if this story hits something in you and you want to support the channel, that little thanks button's always there. Thanks for hanging out. We're HOA Headaches Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.